I'm Michael. Welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each episode we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about Romeo plus Juliet, the 1996 film screenplay by Craig Pearce, Baz Luhrmann, based on Romeo and Juliet, the 1597 play by William Shakespeare, directed by Baz Luhrmann. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Good morrow.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, so our Big Swing Summer continues as we talked last week about Cloud Atlas and how bonkers that was, and we're moving right into bonkers number 2, Romeo plus Juliet, Baz Luhrmann's big swing of an adaptation. I remember, I can't remember if I saw it in theaters, but I remember as a very young person shortly after this came out, watching it and kind of not understanding what was happening to me. I was like too young, like I hadn't quite developed my filmmaker brain yet, but it was starting to get there. And then this was breaking all the rules. The opening of this movie is insane. The gas station shootout with the Mickey Mouse like sound effects and the sped up, action in the frames, and they're speaking Shakespearean dialogue, but it's set in like a Miami, like what is happening? It's an insane opening to this movie. I remember being thrown, and then by the end, feeling like I think I love Romeo and Juliet. I think I'm just really into the story. Like this is just really good. And I want to talk about how this movie achieves that and that arc that it goes on. And I'm curious if it goes on that arc for you guys as well. And, obviously in high school, we were taught Romeo and Juliet. We were shown this movie. And so I feel like this was one of the first kind of works of literature and film that I got to like analyze and spend time on and like think about in a deep way. So there's a fondness I have for this movie that is largely nostalgia, right? That summer, the soundtrack was playing all the time. The Cardigans, Love Me, Love Fool.
Yeah.
Like you just can't. If you're our age, you know this soundtrack and the vibes of this. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear about your guys' perspectives on this, especially those of you who have maybe not seen it before all the way through. Alex, will get to you. But also, yeah, talk about the Baz Luhrmann filmmaking thing, how this relates to Moulin Rouge. I think stylistically there's a lot there, and so Baz Luhrmann went on to become my favorite filmmaker for a little bit because of Moulin Rouge. So these stylistic elements, how he's playing with the cinematic language to kind of crazy effect, the editing, the music, the sound, the relentless just diffusion of everything all the time is interestingly paired with Shakespeare here. So I'm excited to talk about it. Trisha, tell me about Romeo and Juliet.
Gladly. I love this movie. I love it so much. I've always loved it. I love it more now that I understand how much it's doing in style. Like with my analytical hat on this time around, I was like, I just love and appreciate every frame of it so much. I think it is a timeless and a brilliant adaptation of this material. The fact that it is still the one mostly shown in English classes in high school, I think speaks to the inspiration, like how inspired the adaptation is. I think the performances are iconic. Not just from the leads, but this time around, I've always loved John Leguizamo and Harold Perrineau in this. And this time around, I was just like, I'm maybe just here for Tybalt and Mercutio, to be honest.
Right?
Like, I just am obsessed.
Give them a spin-off, Shakespeare. Let's just watch them.
It's just astounding from start to finish. And I will say, I was trying, as you were talking, Michael, to like place the order of like, when did I see this movie? Was it before I saw Moulin Rouge or after? I can't actually remember. It's extremely possible that after I saw Moulin Rouge, I went back because I remember going back to watch Strictly Ballroom also because I was like, hang on, who is this? I need all of this in my life. but I just love the excess of it all and leaning into the like heights of the language as well as the bigness of the world and the style and the melodrama. Like, I know that, it's like Leo's performance has been like memed to death of Romeo falling to his knees and being like, I defy you, stars. Like, I don't care. I love it. Like, I know how ridiculous it is, and I love it. And I cannot wait to get into it with you guys. I don't know. It's a miracle to me. I adore it.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. Brian, what do you make of Romeo plus Juliet?
Couple stories first before we get into the movie that I would like to share. One was I was in a production of this in college and really loved it. Like everyone, it was just one of those like really real bonding experiences where we just all became very close. I'm still close to a lot of the people who were in this. But a few like cool things came of that, which of some of the people went on to do great things. Benvolio was my friend Kunal Nair, who was on The Big Bang Theory. I was Abram. I was the guy, do you bite your thumb at me, sir? And like head of the Montague Boys. For some reason in this movie, they're swapped. So that's a Capulet. But, and then I was also Benvolio's understudy. But then Friar Lawrence was played by James Iams, who 2-3 years ago wrote a play called Fat Ham, which is sort of a modern retelling of Hamlet. And he won the Pulitzer Prize for drama for it, which is like pretty good. And I got to see a production in Philly, like with some of the old grad students from my school and everything. It was really cool. And then to bring it back all full Baz Luhrmann, Lord Capulet was played by Austin Durant, who is currently Zidler on Broadway in Moulin Rouge.
Oh, cool.
Which is pretty awesome. Yeah. So a lot of weird like connections here and stuff. And then to bring it forward to the other day when I watched this movie, that afternoon I went and saw the production of Hamlet that is playing here in LA right now. And it started and I was like, oh, I don't know if I like this. It was like, what if Hamlet was a sexy comedy? And like every scene was like funny or an innuendo and like very like kind of raunchy and everything, really skipping through everything and stuff. And I was like, man, I'm not really crazy about this. And then instead of the fifth act, an inspector comes out to investigate the murders at Elsinore. And then it goes into modern, like F-bomby, just parlance. And then it's just all about people trying to figure out what the plot of Hamlet is. And then they figure out that Hamlet is crazy and thinks he's in a Shakespeare play. I am not kidding. This is what the last 45 minutes of this play is. And I now know what it means to be offended by something. Like, I'm just like, oh, that's what people mean when they say I was offended by like a movie or a show. So I hated that real bad. So this was the best Shakespeare adaptation I saw that day by a mile.
We'll take it.
Low bar.
Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching this movie to bring it back to the actual, topic at hand. I had seen it, I think, once before, and it was just, the bozziness of it was just like, oh, all right, like, yeah, it's a little much for me. And then while I was in the production, I went back and just watched the scenes that I was in, and they're all the most crazy, gregarious, scenes. And I was just like, man, this movie is like this, right? And then rewatching it the other day, I was like, oh, no, it's not. It's like that when it is like that. And then it's not all of the time. And it's actually like has some like nice range to it and some nice dynamic flow. And I was pleasantly, I think, going in knowing what I was getting, essentially, as we talked about with like Cloud Atlas or whatever, where it's just like, okay. And I really enjoyed it and was pleasantly surprised and that I wasn't kind of like having to kind of constantly like bat away the obstacles of enjoyment, right? And I was able to like actually genuinely enjoy it. I'm not a fan of the guns are called longsword and rapier and dagger and Dave Paris is here, it's just like, why? just so we can use the original, like whatever. Some of those choices, really bugged me, but I also knew they were there, so I could just kind of brush them aside. So all in all, yay, happy we're here.
Nice. All right. Alex, what about you?
So yeah, I had only seen this movie in clips before. I realized recently I'd seen some key scenes. I don't know in what context. Maybe my English class experience was not the full movie, but just like, let's watch a scene and talk about adapting, but not like the entire film. Anyway, so yeah, for some reason I had seen scenes from this movie. I, like Brian, was like, that is insane. What the hell did I just watch? Like, what is that movie? This was also, I think, before I had seen Moulin Rouge. I loved watching this movie, seeing it from start to finish, the full flow and experience of it, because it brought me back to the Moulin Rouge experience. This is kind of, for me, peak Baz Luhrmann, where he does kind of dare you to stay on the ride in the opening minutes of these movies, where it's just like, yeah, we're doing this. If you're not down, get out now. And
the movie opens with a trailer for itself, weirdly.
But right from the beginning, actually, I was hooked with that when that TV came on.
Oh, yeah.
And the news anchor is just speaking the pure Shakespeare prose, like no adaptation except for the recontextualization into the news report, into the news delivery. And right away, that's so good. That's so cool, because I, as a lazy American, can kind of hook into the meaning of these words in a way that you can't if these are delivered in kind of, I don't know, some more highbrow, theatery way. There's something about the extremes of this movie. The modern setting helps, and kind of just the visuals that are so accessible help. But yeah, I think it's a brilliant adaptation because it takes words and phrases and figures of speech and things that are just kind of alien to our modern ears and makes them no longer alien because they're paired with such extreme, clear imagery and over-the-top acting and music and big everything, just like Moulin Rouge, where it's like you are going to feel things. And when a director is as capable and as competent as Baz Luhrmann in like holding this crazy package all together and always feeling like he's in control of it, even as it's like seems to be spiraling out of control, I'm just along for the ride at that point. I can trust in him and his decisions. I love by the end where it's just like the literalness, like things that were bothering you, Brian, I was just starting to find delightful. The literalness of like the delivery service and like the like FedEx, we like missed you. Yeah. I was just loving all of that. Cause it's like, yes, like I know the story of Romeo and Juliet. I know these beats, and it's so much fun to see him commit so hard to all these choices. So I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, so what's interesting as you were speaking there, so the reason this is shown to ninth graders, right, is because, like you're saying, you can understand what's happening in the story without understanding any of the words, right? You don't have to understand the dialogue to understand the emotion. Some, I think, of the plot mechanics are probably confusing if you're not really picking up like all the words, but the gist of it, you definitely get the emotional ride that you definitely get. And that is interesting, thinking about filmmaking at a time when it's impossible to understand the words that anyone's speaking in any movie.
I mean, I did watch it with subtitles, so I was cheating in that way. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Which is cool. I think that's like a fun way to watch it, so you can pay attention to the
I don't know
words,
if it's cheating
obviously.
when it's still Shakespeare. Like, it's still Shakespeare's text.
It definitely
It's
helps.
not like, well, now it all makes sense. Yeah.
It definitely helps
Sure.
a lot. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, you're about to go on, Michael, but I think I know where you're going with that, which is it's interesting how at this time, subtitles weren't readily available, in home video or whatnot in 1996. And yet I can tell watching this movie, even without subtitles, I would have understood more of it than maybe the Zeffirelli version or what, more the moment to moment emotions and exchanges that are happening between characters, I think, are clearer in this movie because of the style and the way it's performed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because we just talked about Cloud Atlas, and that movie has an opening montage, as we talked about, that totally throws you off and makes you unable to latch on or understand what the hell's going on. Kind of has a trailer for itself the way that this movie has a trailer for itself, like you said, Brian.
Has a dialect that is hard to understand.
Right, yeah. So there's a lot of comparisons here. And this movie is not shy about anything, but especially not letting you know that we're going to beat you over the head with what this means. So we have that opening monologue once with the TV broadcast, but then we do it again for that trailer. Like, we're going to tell you multiple times this thing, and we're going to be intersplicing. We're going to be using the music. We're going to imagery, sound, kinetic, everything to like beat into you, audience, what this thing is about and what's going to happen. I've always loved that that's part of like the text of Romeo and Juliet too. So I think it's just an interesting comparison coming out of Cloud Atlas, and then also looking around at movies that expect us to know what the story is when they have their actors mumble and then mix it down, and the mixing it's impossible to understand. It's very hard to miss the emotional ride that this movie wants you to go on.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that during the opening sequence of it as well. And you mentioned that subtitles were not readily available. Well, this movie actually puts some of the words of the opening like prologue for you on the screen, right? It like cuts them in, like, in Fair Verona, where star-crossed lovers take their life. You're like, okay, I got it.
And the names, all the names of the characters.
The names, I love that. I was going to say that too. Yeah, they like, here are all the central players. You need to know who they are. It was like, you see the convertible going, the Montague boys, like
The boys.
It's so good.
Brian hates it. He hates it.
But it's all to orient you, and I agree with you. I think what it's doing is, I was reading an interview today with Baz Luhrmann around this time, and he was saying, I wanted to make a movie the way that I thought that Shakespeare would make a movie if he were a filmmaker now. And so, like, kind of trying to do this thought exercise of like, Shakespeare, and this has been said to death, but Shakespeare is, writing for like 3,000 drunken people, right? And like what was the interview I said? He's competing with like sex workers and people baiting bears. Like those are the things vying for attention. Back in the time that Shakespeare was writing. And so like he was trying to do this like, biggest possible melodrama, like everyone needs to be able to pay attention at all times. And so like basically opening, the structure of this movie is the structure of Romeo and Juliet, and it's incredibly effective to tell us right at the outset that this is about star-crossed lovers who are going to die, and it's about death and war and violence, and like it's all the like juiciest stuff that we come to entertainment for, and it frames it all right up front. The other thing I was thinking about is that even though it tells us how it's going to end, and I'd have to watch the montage again to see how much of it is from the future. But most of what's cut into that montage is like happening now, or presumably happened in the past. So it really isn't doing like a Cloud Atlas flash to the middle or flash to the end. It's really doing stage setting and world building, visual world building. We see, the skyscrapers with Montague and Capulet on them, like basically side by side in the city. And then, we like see newspaper headlines of like third civil brawl. Like it's really doing stuff like that where it's catching us up to speed on the situation so far. And then it's basically going to tell the story linearly from that point forward. And so for all of those reasons, I just think it's really smart to like drop us in, get this done. And then, they continue to come back to it, along with that scene at the gas station, which is that fight that breaks out between Tybalt and the Montague boys. And it's like, we finally conclude the sequence with the helicopters down and both of those guys have their hands up and they drop their guns. Yeah, exactly. But it boils up, right? So there's action happening now. There's world building happening, and there's action and conflict happening now. All of it in the opening sequence. So it just grabs your attention and also preps you for what you need to know.
Yeah, that opening is just really, really good. It does push me to the point of like annoyance, that gas station fight where
That was rough.
Yeah, the sped up cartoony stuff and the Jamie Kennedy character hiding and like the old woman is like hitting him with her purse over and over again and they're shooting and it just cuts to like the sign getting hit by bullets. But like it is a lot.
Doesn't Benvolio get like shot point blank but then not? Or I was so confused. I thought Tybalt just like shot him right then and there, but then he wasn't hurt. I don't know. I was confused by that sequence.
Yeah. It's confusing and it's a lot. And it does feel like it's aimed at, a 13-year-old that's just like, look, action, guns, things, like blah, 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 blah. But it is then interesting how as the movie progresses, as you were calling out, Brian, there are these really great dynamics. So it can be loud and as big as possible. And then it can be quiet and moody and we're watching Leo with like the sun setting behind him and it's just like talk show host with Radiohead and it's just like vibes, emotion. And I love that I feel like the medium is expressing the angsty emo teenager like source materialness of it, of just like it's not afraid to dress that up or make it more highbrow than it needs to be. These are teenagers in love, feeling the most insane emotions they've ever felt. And so you, audience, are going to feel the highs of that and the lows of that. And the pacing of the movie is going to speed up or condense as necessary to evoke that same experience in you, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah. And speaking of the teenage like angst of it all, much has been talked about the cast. And I think that, having the young actors is the only way that this works at all. But also, capturing the like feeling of the angst. And, it's straight out of Shakespeare. But when we first meet Romeo, he's talking about another girl that he's like lovesick over. It's pure Shakespeare. It's not Baz's like construction at all. But there have been adaptations where like that's not as big of a deal, but they really are like, hey, he's a lovesick teen and he's like chasing girls basically constantly, and every feeling he's feeling is he's talking about like wanting to die and how depressed he is because Rosalind doesn't like him and all of this stuff. And I really like the way that all of that is played in that sequence. And I feel like, again, if you're going to adapt this, you look into the source material and see what's already there, and then figure out a way to make it, to lean into it, not push it away. Lean into what's already there, work with it. The one thing that was really striking me this time is the Catholic imagery everywhere, all the time. The Virgin Mary is, and then like the Jesus statue on the top of the church, and even their like guns have, the like Virgin Mary on the grip or whatever. And I was thinking, well, yeah, of course. Like, part of the text of the play is that everyone is really religious, right? Like Friar Lawrence is a huge role in this, and like Juliet has to go to confession, and there's a lot of talk of God, and there's a lot. So you can't, because you're going to modernize it, you can't push the religion away. That's in the text. So instead, lean into the religion and make the Catholicism and the like sort of religious, almost like superstition or just culture, a really meaningful part of the production design and the way that this feels, and just set it in a country where that would be reasonable, right? They filmed most of this in Mexico City, and it just feels like it's all of an actual lived in world because what's in the text has been embraced rather than like struggled against.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about the cast and the age of these actors, I was definitely feeling that this time, especially now that like I'm so much older than they were at this time. My friends who I saw the Hamlet, I hated it, production of, they were talking about a production of Macbeth that they had seen where the Macbeth was played by like a Timothy Chalamet type person, like roughly that age and sort of wiry and stuff. And immediately they were just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. And then once it started going, they're like, oh, of course, like this character would think like all of this is a good idea,
right.
You know, right? And I think you get that with Romeo and Juliet too. Is like we're so used to seeing, you know, people, whether it's Hamlet or Romeo and Juliet, we're used to seeing people in the 30s play these teenagers who are like really moody and brash and like really like just like will easily lash out at anything or just kind of go with their gut or go with their heart, whatever. And yeah, I really felt that watching these two actors play these roles because they just feel like kids. And it's like, yeah, of course you're going to want to run away and get married after 3 days or whatever, because like that's what it feels like at that age. And when you're rich and you know like part of these families and stuff, it's just kind of like everything is chaos, so like why not just embrace whatever is in front of you at that moment, you know. And I think that we don't get that a lot. It's weird. Cloud Atlas, we were talking about, it's almost the opposite of what we were talking about with Cloud Atlas, where here in film you can do something you can't usually do in theater because you would normally not be able to cast people of a certain age, or you're doing a college production where all the actors are roughly the same age, or a high school or whatever it is, right? And in film you can be like, no, let's just actually cast people who are not necessarily 13 and 14, but who you buy as just these like really kind of young, bright-eyed kids.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting watching Romeo and Juliet as an adult, revisiting it as an adult, because when you see it as a teenager, you're like, yeah, they're in love. I buy it 100%. They're going to run off together. And now as an adult, it's like, it's so important that they're teenagers because this is insane. Right. Like they're killing themselves and each other and like over like 24 hours of knowing each other. It's wild. But I think, yeah, it's, and I think this movie helps to sell that story because of the style and because of the over the topness of everything and the melodrama of Baz Luhrmann. You get swept up in that insane young love feeling, even as a jaded older person. So yeah, I think it's both stylistically and casting wise and everything really important. All these pieces come together to help me buy into what is really like an insane 24-hour love story.
Yeah. I really love the choice also to make the families essentially like crime families, right? There's, you know, a kind of, it's not a problem in like a traditional adaptation where they're just like wealthy, respected families that are whatever. Like, but here where you get the sense that there's this big underworld that's happening and we never are like told or shown really what kind of crime they're involved in, but that's very much the subtext of all of the way that the families are framed. And so it gets you the like life and death stakes, right? It isn't just like these are warring gangs who like the younger people can't get along, right? This has to be generational. And so like what kind of generational families would continue fighting like this so that the young people end up paying the cost? And crime families are like just the easiest possible way to do that. And it's such smart shorthand. They're using, again, cinematic shorthand. We've all seen a mafia movie. We know what that looks like. And like just by casting the actors and then, you know, they're riding in the back of the limousine and like they're talking to the Captain Prince, right? Who it's like so it makes sense. Who would be like this, have this amount of power, but not fear retribution by the law? Mm-hmm. They're criminal families. It's so easy and it's so smart.
Yeah. I really like how much love there is in this movie, not just between obviously Romeo and Juliet, but between the other characters. Mm-hmm. There's some literal romantic love, right, with like Tybalt and Lady Montague.
His
like
cousin?
Something going on over there.
That's not Shakespeare. That's just Baz.
I was a little confused, when I saw that.
So like there's that stuff going on. But even just the friendship that Romeo has with Mercutio, with Benvolio, like with all these characters, there is like a deep caring and like love for each other that comes across, despite them, as you're saying, Trisha, being kind of a crime family. Like I buy the connection and the kind of history between these characters, and because they care about each other, it helps me care about them when I might not, as a first-time viewer, immediately understand who these people are or like exactly where they plug in the family tree. But because they are a shared group that love each other, I'm also invested in their relationships.
Yeah, I really love that, and it's because it's Baz Luhrmann. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's not a cynical guy at all, and I do think it's important in this modernization of Shakespeare into like the 90s, which could be a very cynical, like cool. Yeah, there's a version of cool in the 90s that's very cynical and kind of heartless, and I think there's just so much heart here, even as it brings in like the MTV style. There's something about male relationships in the past before like no homo, like there's something more heartfelt and loving there that isn't stripped out in the service of kind of 90s cool MTV era, and I think that's what you're pointing to, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, I think the take on Mercutio here is open, like asks sort of an open-ended question about the character's sexuality.
Oh, totally.
And so
drag,
I actually really, really like that. I love this Mercutio. Like, I love Harold Perrineau. I love this take on Mercutio. I think it makes the relationship between him and Romeo so layered and interesting and like really open to interpretation. I agree that the care is genuine and feels, like Romeo would kill for this person, right? Because you have to have that. You have to have that level of connection between these two characters. But I also think that he's, this big sort of loose cannon, when he comes, the way he's introduced in the movie, which is he's already like, he's sitting in the back of the car's like gliding around. He's already in the like silver outfit with the wig on, with the lipstick on, and just like so over the top. And you get the sense that like, oh, it's Mercutio, and everyone's just like, we love him. He's so funny. He kind of commands the space. They're in that broken down theater at Sycamore Grove and on the beach. And like, he just kind of, you feel like he could do anything, right? You feel like he's unstable. He's passionate. He's a loose cannon, and he could do or be anything in the scene. And I think it's possibly the most brilliant thing about this. There's so much that's brilliant about it, but it works incredibly well, where I'm just like, Mercutio is like impossible to pin down, and he's going to lead them all to disaster, not intentionally, but just by being who he is. And that's kind of who the character has to be.
Yeah, and when we did this production, we remember talking about that, where there are certain lines where you could easily read it, like Tybalt says, like to Mercutio, like "Thou consortest with Romeo," right? Mm-hmm. Which like could mean multiple things. And then Romeo has a line when they're kind of bickering back and forth. Like Romeo has a line where it says like, I forget what he says, something about Mercutio says something about the goose, and Romeo says like, "That was never there for anything when that was not there for the goose," like, and they're like goosing like each other, whatever. But just like kind of like really leaning into that as just an option. Same with Horatio and Hamlet, who is literally hooking up with Hamlet in the production. So it's so bad. And Mercutio is also like literally swings both ways between the Montagues and the Capulets, because he is not actually part of either family. So he's able to like stroll into one play, and then of course like a plague on both your houses, right? Like I shouldn't have been involved in any of this, right? And then when you talk about the kinship, that was another thing that was really fun, to just always be together and like form this little band of people with the other Montagues. I just remember Mercutio doing his like finger of an alderman agate stone speech, it was like we're all laying on our backs and he's just standing over us, like, doing the speech to us. And it's just like when you're actually doing the full play, you have so much time to just kind of hang out with those people. And then to your point, this movie is trying to get it all done in 2 hours. And yet that's still there, right? We still feel that moment. We still feel those relationships. We're not spending a ton of time with them all hanging out, but the time we do spend, we do feel that love and that camaraderie and everything. I think the pacing of this movie is really good. Like, I really liked that it was, had to cut out a lot to try to get it all done in time, but at the same time was like saving time for the beats, knowing when to slow down, knowing when to take its time, knowing when it could just kind of give you just enough information that we could just keep moving on, so I think that's all worth applauding.
And speaking of pacing, this movie, like Moulin Rouge, comes to that lovers meet sequence, and I think it just does it so well. Like, there's so much craziness and party leading into that moment, but yeah, them meeting and then the whole famous balcony pool scene. I think it's just so well done. And like you were saying, Brian, earlier, if you see just clips of this movie, this looks like an exhausting music video for 2 hours. I don't know if I can take this, but those scenes are not like that. Those are just really beautifully put together love scenes. So I don't know if we want to talk about, Leo and Claire doing their thing.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, I think it's great the way the movie slows down and takes its time, has care for these scenes, kind of subverts your expectations a little bit, right? They fall into the pool. That's not how you picture the balcony scene happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so even in its kind of adaptation, it's a little playful, which is capturing the kind of playful mood between them. There's a lot of underwater like photography and kind of getting that very stylized visuals that kind of distort reality and convey that sort of like the way love distorts reality. When they first see each other, it's through the fish tank that's literally distorting each other's like imagery. These performances are just really, really good. Claire Danes is just amazing in this. Like, somehow she captures, as we've talked about, this teenage idealistic naivete, but also like a little bit of wisdom. Like she's a little bit smarter. She's a girl. Like, she's smarter than the dumb young boy, and those layers are there, but like believable. And there's parts of the text that let her kind of that suggest she's seeing things more clearly, like when she's looking down at Romeo after, like, as they're parting, and like he thinks it's like a tomb or whatever she says. So like she has this kind of extra third dimension that I feel like Claire Danes is able to carry and hold, while also like being a believable, bright-eyed, impulsive like girl that's just like in love and wants this. And she was 17, I think.
17 years old.
Yeah, it's just very impressive at that age to be able to be doing all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then weirdly, Leonardo DiCaprio like made a name for himself by falling in love with someone from a different social circle who has an important necklace and then dying.
There's
Water,
some
that was his
shots
thing.
where in this movie, you could literally cut into Titanic and you wouldn't know. Like, where it's a little blue, he's all wet, like it's dark. It's like, you could put that in Titanic and no one would know.
Think just while we're on the pool scene here, I think the pool actually is more important than I realized when I think about how it brings me into that teenage mindset of a teen in the 90s. Because what do you remember from 90s, like just hanging out with friends or like weird early romantic experiences? It's like you're just like goofing off in a pool in somebody's backyard. And I think there's something about that brings the Shakespeare kind of balcony stodginess into, once again, the teen experience of the moment. And there's something that's, I think, really important actually about them falling into the pool together and hiding from the guard in the pool and all that stuff.
Well,
Maybe the rich teen experience. My friends didn't have pools.
Well, I grew up in Arizona. That was like
the Arizona
mandatory,
Arizona
or you
pool,
will
yes.
die. Yeah.
Life or death. Yeah.
Yeah, I was really paying attention to the motif of water this time because it's everywhere in this movie. In fact, actually, when we first meet Juliet, she's submerged in water, right? We see her from the bottom. She's in the bathtub or whatever, and the hair is floating around her hair, around her head. And then we actually see almost the exact same shot of Romeo in the bathroom before he meets her, where he sticks his head in the sink and he is somehow stops being high because he put his face in water.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
It's a movie.
But like we hear him, like shouting. We see him like shouting underwater almost in almost the exact same shot where he has his face in the sink. And, in literature, water as a motif can represent a few different things. And I think this movie plays with it really in such a cool and deliberate way where, water can represent like chaos and death, but it like in, sort of religious terms, water is about baptism, right? You go under the water and like a representation of death. And when you come out, you're alive again. Or a different person essentially. But water also has this meaning of like peace, and calm and escape. And so I think it plays with both of those things where you have something like the fish tank that's being contrasted with like Romeo sticks his face into the sink and like yells underwater in this sort of chaotic way, almost like, again, a baptism. And when he comes out, then you have this water separating them that's also foreshadowing what's going to happen to them. I think it's really interesting staging the balcony scene around a swimming pool. And having, when they give their pledge to each other, they've like climbed out of the pool and then she like runs back and falls into his arms and they go under the water together. And we see kind of like that final last passionate kiss that's under the water. And then when they come out, they go their separate ways and Juliet has that like almost prophecy about how badly it's all going to end. And I just think that that's, again, leaning into some of the literary symbolism that's already embedded in water as a motif. And then at the very end, after they've killed themselves and they're lying there in the church, we cut back to that scene. We cut back to a few scenes of them together and alive, but we go back to that scene underwater as the very last one. And it reminds us of that, like, again, the symbol of like death and rebirth that is. And I just think it's so beautifully done. And it's just another testament to a director who really knows what the hell they're doing. Like when you know what your movie's about and you're drawing on literary text and literary influences, then you can access these symbols that have had meaning throughout the history of literature and mine them for additional meaning. And it makes the texture of your film that much richer. Like I read that the scene where Mercutio is killed and he's there, lying on the beach and a storm is blowing in. I was reading that was just literally a hurricane was blowing in while that scene was actually being shot. And Baz was just like, roll, we're rolling. But then, you have that and there's water coming down. It's raining and as the sequence progresses where Romeo is escalating, into violence. And then he shoots Tybalt and Tybalt falls into a fountain. He falls into water. Again, you get these pieces of inspiration in terms of adapting and using the medium. You can't have all that water on stage. That's not a thing you can do in a traditional Shakespeare adaptation. That's what this version can do. And so it's just being a movie at its best.
Yeah. I do love that, like the midpoint, like Mercutio dying, the insanity of, you can feel the weather is intense and it's just left on that wide shot, right? Where Romeo
leaving
is, like,
it on the wide shot is so good.
Yeah, and like he runs. And you can kind of feel a little bit of like, this is an interesting choice. Was this intentional? Or like you can kind of feel in this movie they didn't have a ton of budget. But I feel like that adds to the chaos and rawness. And I feel like in that moment, it's like exactly the right choice of just like, and a cacophony of imagery and sound. We're going to stay on this like still locked off shot and let this play out. And then it builds up and then launches into that insane thing where then Romeo kills Tybalt. I'm reminded that back in the day, as I was learning to compose shots, I downloaded this and like DivX, right, or whatever on my computer, and I would take screenshots of different frames and print them out on a piece of paper so that I could look at them, and like when I made my own storyboards, like draw like shapes over them to understand, oh, this is how you frame a close-up, this is how you like do this kind of shot. And so it was weird watching this and my brain being like, oh, I've seen this frame 1,000 times because it's the frame that taught me what a close-up was in my brain. And so I also just love that this movie is cares about all of the aspects of filmmaking. Like there's crazy editing, there's cacophony of things, but it also cares about framing and the symbolism behind what's in the frame. As you're talking about Trisha the Water, like there are very composed, purposeful shots in this movie. And I love that Baz Luhrmann is able to do that as well as crazy montage town all in the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a difference between sloppy craziness, where you just feel like the director was kind of harried and didn't have time to do it right, and so we're just going to get a bunch of angles and cut it together. And I don't feel that with Baz Luhrmann ever. I really feel, because then you see the effort that goes into the production design, and when you're walking up to Juliet's tomb and there's so many candles and it's so gorgeous and it's like, wow, they really lit all those candles. When Romeo's returning to the city in that finale, it's crazy. There's helicopters up above, shouting his name and police everywhere, and it's almost like a chase scene. And it just feels like those aren't sloppy sequences. They feel crazy and out of control, but the shots, the sound, the editing, the flow of them the director is in command of this. He's not kind of flailing or trying to figure out how to fix it in post. And that's what I love about Baz Luhrmann is it has the feel of a movie that is like being fixed in post, or kind of, oh dear God, what have we done? But it was all intentional actually, and you can feel that it was intentional, and because you couldn't have gotten these shots in this edit without it being intentional.
Yeah.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit. And I think I largely agree. And this is kind of my lesson. So maybe we can kind of dovetail into lessons here.
I'll say real quick that it just feels like Goodfellas. Like that sort of, especially like the third act of Goodfellas, right? Where it's just that total chaos and everything. Right down to Paul Sorvino as Ted Montague.
Yeah.
I'll never get over Ted Montague and Dave Paris. But to your point, Alex, that sort of just like absolute chaos that feels like there's intention behind it.
Yeah, and so I 100% agree that like most of the time it feels like there is total intention behind what's happening. I think for some of those crazy chaotic sequences though, it does feel like we're fixing it in post. Not that there was like a thing that went wrong, but just to get that chaos, that uncontrolled style, I feel like it almost has to be a little bit of that like slapdash. Like the cut, the two shots that I always remember is in that sequence where you're talking about where they're chasing Romeo and it's just like in the helicopter and it's just like craziness. And there are two shots, one of which is rapidly zooming in on a building, and it then cuts to rapidly zooming out of a building. What building? I don't know. It's just a building. We're just really zooming in on this building and then quick zoom out of and then we're moving on.
My brain erased that. I mean, that's. I think if I could see this movie more than once to like register.
Sure, right.
Because in the moment it somehow is working. Where like I don't know what I'm even looking at, but I'm okay.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's again the dynamic range that this movie has, even in its just editing style, where there are sequences that feel very methodically like planned out and edited to a certain pace, and then it goes all the way to I would absolutely buy that like create a montage editor where it feels chaotic and it's just like we got B-roll where we were zooming in, like grab that, zoom out, do back to back, chaos. That's great. Like it's 6 frames, it doesn't matter. It evokes the thing. And I think that's kind of like a different kind of intentionality. And I love that this movie dares to be impressionistic almost like that when it wants to be. And Trisha, you mentioned earlier when we're meeting Mercutio and they're going to the party and they're in the car and the car is spinning.
Yeah.
Like that's such an insane shot. There's no, like the car is clearly on some kind of mechanical device that's spinning it around in a way that would never happen. So it's not a realistic thing, but the filmmakers knew that they wanted this effect of like a spinning car moving in a way that's impossible to get this shot. And I just love that there's intention behind even those impressionistic, crazy, stylistic moments. And then also this crazy, chaotic editing. I feel like I, as a filmmaker, learned so much from looking at the editing of this movie and Moulin Rouge and just what the power of images can be. And then, of course, coupled with sound. The sound in these movies is so much work. But they're great to study, I think, if you want to look at what editing can do when you turn the dial all the way to 11.
Yeah, shout out to Jill Bilcock, who did both these movies and Strictly Ballroom. And it's just like some sort of mad scientist where it's just like there are times where I'm like, I hate so much that this is what you chose to do. And then other times where I'm like, you're an absolute genius, like who no other human being could have ever like done that choice and had like no other human being could have been as effective with the editing as you were for this, whatever this specific choice is.
Yeah. Right. Because like this movie does not work without this editing. Like,
or this music, or there's so many things that come together in this and Moulin Rouge. Where like without the score and the music to carry you through emotionally, it would be a much rougher ride.
Oh, yes.
100%. Alex, what's your lesson?
I just want to praise this movie for being so dedicated to sticking with the original Shakespearean language because, you know, we're talking about all the ways this movie is modernizing Shakespeare, but it is very specifically not modernizing the language. And this movie did spawn a whole genre of kind of teen comedies and 10 Things I Hate About You, adaptations of Shakespeare stories, but not the language itself. And I just think I love that this movie never took a shortcut or decided, what, for this scene they're going to speak a little more plain English, or we're going to adapt it a little bit here. Just the dedication to no, we are sticking with the original language always, even down to the newscaster. I think it's just such a cool choice. And I appreciate the dedication to that, because it would be easy to kind of cheat or, maybe the main character speak that way, but then, the newscaster doesn't or whatever. And I think it's just part of this amazing like swagger and confidence this movie has, where it just, and as we were talking about with these choices, like, how do you know in pre-production that you definitely need the car to spin in this way for some reason? Like, there's no logical way to arrive there. There's just this Baz Luhrmann intuitive genius that decides it's worth spending money on this thing because it's going to be great in some kind of impressionistic way later. And so, I think bold creative choices and confidence. If you're somebody like Baz Luhrmann, who's going to like really commit to it and see it all the way through, it's very impressive to me as someone who usually needs to find a way to justify things in kind of a more logic-based way. Like, I don't know how to make a movie like this. I wouldn't know how to do this because there's just so many bold, intuitive choices that you have to commit to. And I would have no idea how to know in advance it was going to work. But somehow he knows, and he pulls it off most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Does he know, or does he believe, or does he not care? Whatever those are, you need that in order to do
whatever
this,
his brain psychology is.
This thing
has made this possible.
Yeah, but there's a very bold, maybe not calculated, a thought through big swing happening where we're not going to adapt the language, sticking to that.
That's a constraint.
We are going to adapt everything else. That's our design.
And I think this movie doesn't work without that. Because that's why everything else can be what it is because you've chosen this constraint and you're sticking to it but then we have total free reign with everything else around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think John truly would call that a strong designing principle, how you were choosing to tell your story in a unique way.
Well, and, part of the reason that directors have come back to Shakespeare over and over again throughout history is the freedom to interpret it, right? Like that's what a director's job is interpretation. And the thing about Shakespeare is there's no stage direction or very little when you read the text of a Shakespeare play. And so you have all of this freedom to actually interpret the lines, the delivery, characters in Shakespeare will be speaking to one person and then they'll turn and speak to another person, you think, but that's not indicated in the actual play. And so you as the director are like, this line goes to this person, that line goes to that person over there, that line's shouted from off stage over there, right? Like this one you cross down, you sit here. This one's a joke. Is that in the text? Do you know it's a joke? Maybe. Or you could just say it like it is. And I think that's part of the allure for a director where it's just like, it's fun. It's a playground to play on. The language is a playground. And so, yeah, this adaptation, as you're saying, is brilliant at that.
Brian, what's your lesson?
Yeah, just kind of wrapping up what we've already been talking about the sort of the dynamics here and the style, and I think that the note I made was this movie usually knows when to get out of its own way. And I think that, I've mentioned many times the sort of like the Wes Andersons and the Tarantinos and a lot of the more stylistic filmmakers from this time. It's like later in their career, they just got more and more of themselves and more of the style. And sometimes to me, that's to the detriment where I'm like, you can't just like do a scene because you have to do all of your stuff, all of your like style baggage has to be there with you, and that's not always true, but those are the times when I find it sort of frustrating. I don't know if I mentioned this production of Hamlet that I saw, but it just felt like it was constantly apologizing for itself. Like, sorry, you have to sit through this Hamlet scene. So we'll try to make it funny. We'll try to make it sexy. We'll try to do whatever, and it's like, no, that's not how that works. And then this movie, it just feels like it's big and it's bold, but it's mostly crazy when it's allowed to have fun, like the Mercutio like dance sequence, like all that kind of stuff, where it's like this is the fun part of the movie, so we're going to do all the big crazy stuff, right? And then it's like it's big and emotional and sort of earnest in a lot of ways, but that's like when people are really angry and really upset, and it's like, yeah, it can be too much, but at the same time it knows that it really wants you to have a big emotional reaction here, or at least it wants you to see that the movie is doing a big emotional thing. And then there are like quiet people are falling in love now, and people are being really contemplative about things, so now the music's going to drop out and the pacing is going to slow way down, and it just feels like it doesn't feel like it's constantly trying to show you a bunch of shiny things so you'll sit through this scene, or that it's trying to rush over the quieter scenes so that you don't get bored, whatever. It feels like it knows when to take its time. It's like it knows what each sequence wants to be, but it also knows what the bigger picture is trying to be. So it doesn't feel like you're getting several different movies in the same movie. It feels like the same movie, but that it is just doing that dynamic flow. So yeah, lesson is, especially if you're doing something stylized, something big swingy, just know when to get out of your own way and know when to let the thing just be what it wants to be.
Yeah. I'm struck by that. That's not always the case. That like it feels like the filmmaker cares about every scene in this movie equally. Like they want every scene to be good and to be itself. And I think there are other movies where you can feel this filmmaker mostly cares about the action, and then people have to sit and talk some of the time. And so we'll shoot this plainly, we'll get it, but like the care and the craft goes into this sequence or that sequence.
Right.
And I feel like, yeah, there's love for every moment of this movie. And I feel like that's what you want in your storyteller. And I think that's what you should want as a storyteller. Like, find a way to be in love with every moment of your story. And like, that's I think a fun challenge to put on yourself. Get creative if it's not working for you, and find a way to be in love with every moment of the story you're telling.
I just weirdly thought of the fact that like the most popular scene from Heat is like two guys sitting in a diner talking. And it's largely because of who the actors are, but like there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in that movie, and that's the scene that people are like, man, that scene's great, right? And I wonder how many movies there are that are like you said, movies that where the focus is the big action thing or the big whatever, where like the scene that everyone goes back to is just like a quiet moment between people, because like you said, they care as much about that moment as they do the other moments.
Yeah. Trisha, what's your lesson?
Yes. Before I get to my lesson, I quickly want to shout out a beautiful review of this that I read today that was published in 2021 in Time Magazine. It's by the critic Stephanie Zacharek. And she had initially panned this movie when it came out. And then in 2021, 25 years later, went back and basically like wrote a celebration of the movie and how she's come to view it differently 25 years later. And it's just so beautifully written, and I really enjoyed it. So it's in Time and is from 2021. So I recommend checking it out. And it really celebrates the acting in a way that like I am going to struggle to do justice to. So that's not going to be my lesson, but I want to call out and celebrate the acting. It really celebrates Harold Perrineau's Mercutio and John Leguizamo's Tybalt, and then Pete Postlethwaite, who plays Father Lawrence in this. So I adore.
He's great.
So much work.
He's really great.
He's so wonderful in it. And one of the other things that it mentions is the care that's put into the production and costume design. And I think that when I watch this movie, what I think about a lot is the costumes and the amount of work that the costumes are doing toward the characterization. And I just think it's infinitely rich for study for that reason. And one of the, obviously, like, all the costumes are incredible. You know, I think about John Leguizamo's like vest that has the Virgin Mary on it, and the holsters and the jacket, and then like his entire haircut and style and facial hair. The boots, I feel like Tybalt's boots in the opening scene at the gas station. I mean, they're
sound when he like steps on the thing.
The like crunch of the metal when he's like putting out the cigarette. It's all so good. And how far it goes to communicate the kind of person who would kill over an insult, right? Like there's this sense of put togetherness to the character and pride and, you know, meticulousness to detail. It's like he's not going to let a thing pass. This has to be somebody who wants to engage Romeo in a duel later in the movie. And if he's going to be engaging in a duel, then he is probably going to shoot his guns like a dancer. And he is probably going to be dressed with this very particular style. And I think the costume design goes so hard and unbelievably beyond at every moment. Then also you set the pivotal couple scenes of the lovers meeting during a costume ball. And so thinking about how to approach that and what the other layer of a character now that you're creating has to then choose to wear a costume. What costume does that character wear? And what does that choice say about who that person is? This particular review that I was reading was highlighting the idea that, like, you know, Romeo's buddies are like dressed like who they kind of admire, maybe. One of them's a Viking, one of them's a priest, you know, and then Romeo's dressed like a knight. And then Mercutio comes in, and this is who Mercutio, like, it chooses to be on this night of all nights and what that says. And then, like, even, you know, Tybalt's like devil horns and like red vest that he has on, and Juliet's mother's like Egyptian queen, how she sees herself, right, as like a pharaoh or pharaoh's wife. And then, of course, the angel wings and Juliet's white angel gown. And I think they're so iconic. And I think that adding that element of like costume and performance to something that is already we're so used to seeing it being performed in like a stagey kind of way, and then dressing them in like additional costumes at this kind of a masquerade ball. I just think it's so like wisely approached and envisioned. And also, gives us all of these images. Basically every image, like promotional image from the movie is with them in their costumes at the costume ball with the wings and the knight. So yeah, costume design is good. You should get good costume designers, but also like have a really clear idea of if you're the director, you're pointing your camera at this. So what's in the frame is crucially important, and a large part of what people are going to see are the costumes. Also, on the point of just want to say, you can get a lot more into this if you watch the DVD extras, which you can probably find on YouTube, which I watched a ton when I was in high school. But the scene where they're kissing in the elevator, which I love so much, is kind of the perfect marriage of like the costume of it all, the characterization of it all, and like the choice to like sneak into the elevator to hide where her mother's trying to come and find her, right, and introduce her to Paul Rudd. And then in the DVD extras, they do a bit where they show how they got that scene because they have to do the circle around. And it's the elevator with paneled walls. It's like an octagonal or like hexagonal elevator, essentially. And all the panels have lights in them. They were all like movable panels. So they basically built a room that each panel could lift up by a hinge. And then they just had crew people lift it up as the camera moved past it and then lower it back down. But it's a small room. It's like, I don't know, 4 feet in diameter. So just again, the thing with the car moving on the circular track, it's like spared no expense. They knew what they were doing to get the shot the way that you saw it, to capture the emotion. And yeah, it's the care. Just care about it.
It's the opposite of lazy filmmaking.
Oh my God.
It's going way further than you ever had to. Nobody asked you to do this, but you care and love it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could remember a quote. I probably said it on the podcast not too long ago from one of my favorite books on writing. That's basically like cast for the third act or direct for the third act, something to the idea.
Your job is to steer the audience toward the third act or something like that.
Yeah. Something like that. Anyway, that came to my head when you were talking about the costumes and like this is a character who will have to challenge Romeo to a duel. What does that character wear? Like thinking about characters and in terms of the narrative function and utility they will play, and then how do you express that from the first frame, I think is really smart. What a movie. Okay, well, I want to hear what else you guys have been watching. Before we do that, reminder that next episode we're going to talk about Pulp Fiction, which we have not talked about somehow. We've talked
What episode number is that?
Well, I was going to ask you, Brian, what episode number is our next episode?
I believe it's 200.
200.
Whoa.
Wow. That's
a
very
big
exciting.
one. That's a lot of episodes.
Big round number. And that's not including our Patreon exclusive episodes.
That's so many episodes, you guys.
We've done a lot of episodes.
There's there's an actual count somewhere, and it's like 320 or something.
The statistician knows.
But yes, we know who knows. But yes, our 200th public episode. I think we also recently had our 6th year anniversary or something insane. We've been doing this for a while, so thank you everyone for going on this journey with you, and your reward is Pulp Fiction, I guess. That's what we're gonna
Happy birthday!
Yay!
Happy birthday!
200.
Last time we talked about Tarantino, it was great. It went fine. So
is that the last time?
That was not the last time.
Yeah, it wasn't.
We did Reservoir
Tarantino.
Dogs. We did Reservoir Dogs, and that actually was fine.
Okay, sorry. That was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a long time ago.
In a very warm apartment in Hollywood. We talked about that movie and we were angry.
Oh, that one's legendary.
Yeah.
It's a patron exclusive though, so
yeah. You want to hear us younger and angrier? Go join us on Patreon.
So hot.
Oh man. I think it was also when we'd still kind of drink whiskey and stuff more recorded.
What are you talking about?
I mean, I know. I think we're a little bit more measured now.
When I think more
about
in
that
person,
movie,
more drunk, less air conditioning. Yeah.
Exactly.
We were children.
Yes.
Yeah. I was your age.
What else have we been watching, everybody? Alex, what have you been watching recently?
So I went and saw 28 Years Later, I guess the third installment in the 28 series.
But also the first installment in the 28 Years trilogy.
So apparently it's the first movie of
is
the new
it?
trilogy, which was apparent to me by the ending of the movie, which seemed to be like, and now we're setting up a new thing. Anyway, very interesting movie. Danny Boyle and Alex Garland reunited. They did not write and direct the second movie in this series, 28 Weeks Later, which I watched in preparation for this. Didn't love it. 28 Years Later, very interesting movie. It goes to some interesting, weird new places with this universe that they've created. There's some choices. There's this thing called alphas now in the world, which are just like roided out, like naked man zombies that are
big dick zombies.
That like literally have huge dick. Yeah. Anyway, it's crazy. Yeah. Pregnant zombies. I don't want to give away too much. Anyway.
Yeah.
There's also like fat zombies that crawl on the ground. Crazy new ideas. I guess zombies it's been 28 years, so they're kind of evolving in different directions.
This is the worst pitch.
Some interesting character stuff. Ralph,
yeah, you're leaning into the most Alex Garland like stuff.
Yeah,
in the
like
movie.
you can tell, like latter-day Alex Garland did work on this movie. Ralph Fiennes is in it and has like a lovely performance, and the kid who's in it, what's his name, Alfie Williams, is really good. So lots of good things in this movie. I can't say that I'm a fan of this franchise. I don't think. It was shot on iPhone, I believe, to replicate like that's the mini DV of today or whatever.
I see.
Yeah.
I'm just like, all right, like, or you could just, I don't know, just shoot it on a nice camera.
Just be normal.
It's okay. Anyway, so I'm in a weird place now where this series is making interesting bonkers choices that I'm not sad that I saw. Like, wow, crazy. So part of me wants to keep watching, and part of me is very tired, and I don't need to keep watching. So I don't know how I feel about the 28X Later series, but I'll probably see the next one.
What are
I'll
they going
just
to call
add
the
that-
next one?
It's a good question.
28 Years Later, The Bone Temple. I believe it comes
Oh,
out
we're
next year.
We're
Oh.
entering Avatar
Excuse you?
territory.
Yeah.
Dear God.
The Bone Temple is in this movie.
Yeah.
And is,
Oh,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But the thing that you're not mentioning is the Danny Boyle of it all, which
Right.
he like. I talked about stylized filmmakers who like really go stylized. Danny Boyle's the hell out of this movie in ways that are completely insane and bonkers, and the ending is a cartoon sort of like sequence.
Yeah, I didn't resonate with that.
That was
ending.
insane.
Yeah.
But point is, I think for me, I am enough of the fanboy where it's just like every time he did something insane, I was just giddy in the theater. Like 90.
He's your Baz Luhrmann.
The kind exactly right. It's like when he does the crazy stuff, and it's like it is a 28 like later movie, and I love the first one. I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy right now.
Nice.
That's how I feel during
Trisha.
Moulin Rouge. See,
Do you wanna-
now we understand each other.
Not
That's
to
how
go see
that's
that
how I feel
together?
during half of Moulin Rouge.
Excellent. Well, Brian, what have you been watching then?
I watched Presence, the first of the two David Koepp's Steven Soderbergh joints that came out this year, which is a ghost story entirely told from the POV of the ghost. So it's set entirely in a house. This family moves in. Lucy Liu is the mother, and we are seeing everything as the ghost is sort of moving around the house and kind of checking in on people. And then drama ensues, and it becomes a bit of like a thriller after a little while. And I really, really loved it. There's an exposition thing, I should say, that didn't earn another thing that really bothered me. But just the mood of it all and kind of like the soul of the movie. It's not a scary movie, because that's not the kind of movie it's trying to be. But I did find it just like really stirring, and it stuck with me for like several days after I saw it. So I definitely recommend Presence. It's a pretty quick watch, and it's entertaining if nothing else.
It's good to know, because I was curious about it, and I really loved their other joint project, which is Black Bag. Yeah, both like not long movies. They're kind of making movies old school, just like tight, like not horribly expensive, mid-budget, good movies. Wow, we can still do that.
Nice.
Wild. Trisha, what have you been watching recently?
Well, so in a couple of weeks from right now, when you are hearing this, listeners, I am going to go to San Diego Comic-Con because I was asked to be on a panel there. And I'm so excited about it. The name of the panel is The Hidden Power of a Director's Cut. And so I am doing research, getting ready for that. And I actually haven't watched any of it yet because I've been too busy watching these other big swing movies that we've been talking about. But I have, I was crowdsourcing a little bit on movies that I should watch in preparation for this panel on the Discord. And so the ones I have on my list are Kingdom of Heaven, the regular and the director's cut. I've never seen either of those.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to watch them, and I'm very stoked about that. Someone suggested to me that I guess I have to watch the Justice League thing. That seems
it's fascinating.
Like, it seems like a critical part of this conversation, so I guess I might do that. Godfather 3, which I have seen.
You're gonna love Cloud Atlas after you watch the Snyder Cut. You're gonna be like, you know what? Cloud Atlas is a pretty chill movie.
Ooh, okay, well, yeah, I'm very curious about all of this. Anyway, if you, listener, have more required reading for me that you think I need to watch in preparation for this, a lot of the other sort of usual suspects I've seen, but I'm very curious what we think we need in terms of referencing the power of a director's cut. And yeah, if you're going to be at San Diego Comic-Con, come see my panel. I believe it's on Thursday at 4 p.m. But yeah, you can follow me on social media or comment here. If you're on YouTube, you can just comment and we'll try to get the details up. And you can also just tell me what you think that I should watch so I can be the most informed panelist there, because as we know, panels are about winning.
Of course. Yes. Yeah. We'll make sure all the details are in the comments and in the description once we have the time and date pinned down. And yes, leave comments about what director's cuts Trisha should watch, because I want to know. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Also the the danger of a director's cut, as we've seen with like the Hobbit movies and stuff,
yes.
right? And I was thinking as you were talking, Trisha, like Big Swing Summer is a lot of movies that was like they just let them make the director's cut.
Right.
is what it feels like,
Yeah.
right?
I remember when there was like years of discourse about the Snyder Cut. I'm glad that era is over.
Maybe it isn't.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
You're going to
Maybe it's not.
reignite it.
Unreleased the Snyder Cut.
Awesome.
Michael.
Cool. Well, speaking, Alex, of low budget movies that are less than 2 hours, I watched A Real Pain recently.
Oh.
The movie written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg that Kieran Culkin won the Oscar for. And it was a lovely little film. I really enjoyed it. It was nostalgic, just watching a movie about characters, and it was small and contained, but about a thing and well executed. I found it compelling. I was engrossed. Again, it's so weird to have these like normal entertainment experiences in just a normal movie. And I forgot while watching it that Jesse Eisenberg directed it. And I think that is high praise of his directing. Like, I think that's, for me, often a barrier when I know like an actor is the director of a thing. I'm always kind of judging it in a different way of like, okay, yeah, it's an actor choice right there to do that, or like whatever it is, I get in my own way. But occasionally I forget, and this is one of those movies that I forgot, which was cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. A Real Pain, written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg.
Nice.
All right, well, we're getting to the end of the big swing. As we said, we have Pulp Fiction and then The Fountain coming up. We've been on quite a wild ride here, and I haven't seen Pulp Fiction in a long time, and I haven't seen The Fountain in a long time, and I don't know how I'm going to react. My memory is a love-hate relationship with both of them.
Big swing summer is not over, my friends. We have some big swings still to come.
Yep.
Big swings to come. So stay tuned. We want to say a big thank you, as always, to the patrons that have made, and continue to make this show possible. If you want to help us make more episodes and get access to our exclusive episodes, like our episode on Cloud Atlas that we released last week, head over to the Beyond the Screenplay Patreon. The link is in the show notes. We want to say thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Wuerth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tugger, and I'm joined today by Trisha Arand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see you next week for Pulp Fiction.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.